Welcome folks. Today I was going to be talking a little bit about a modification I made to a Rochester 2-barrel carburetor. Same could be applied to a 4-barrel one as well. This is typically how you would change the filter in one of these. Some are mounted on a 90-degree angle off the side. Some are in the front like this one. You'd basically loosen this fitting here with a sizable wrench, right size hopefully. And once you get it loose, you can take it out. Actually, you take the fuel line out of here first. It'll look something like so with a fitting on it, flared fuel line that goes in the front. And to show you what I've done, I'd say it in a filter video I made previously about how small these things were. Now you can see all the stuff that starts coming out of there, and the filter comes out as well. It's so tiny. Even if you had the bigger one like I showed you in the other filter video, it's still kind of small looking. So I thought to myself one day, maybe I can increase the capacity of that and make it a bit more manly, if you will. What I did was eliminated the way this, the regular fuel line is attached to there with this nut and flared fuel line. I thought to myself, I was kind of liking the looks of these things. Slightly larger than a small one of these. Still kind of not that big, but it was so easy to change the fuel filter, and I'll explain some problems you have with the original design when I put it back together here. So what I've done is I got a brass fitting, and it takes this tapered thread here. It's a 1/8 NPT. It's a tapered pipe thread. So what I've done is put the fitting in where the fuel line nut normally screws in and cinches up. Put the brass fitting in there and got busy with a propane torch and soldered it. I made a pretty job of it. I used a rat tail file to make a nice fillet in there, radius if you will. So now what you can do, at least I can, is I can use one of these. All you do is screw that in there like so. And then all you have to do in order to change the filter after you make, or at least I made this modification, is just basically get the typical hose connection with the clamps onto the fuel line. Had to cut the fuel line to do this as well. But just to give you an idea, that's one option. Another option here is, I'm going to kind of wing it. I don't have the fitting to really show you, but I can give you an idea. Assuming this brass piece of pipe had the same thread as this, which is a tapered pipe type thread. Assuming that thread was on the end of there, just basically screw it in the same setup that I've already done, this modification, and screw one of those in. Then you can increase the capacity of your filter, which is probably a better idea. You could actually do this without the modification where I sweat soldered in the other fitting there, and just basically have your fuel line like so, and put one of these filters in line here somewhere between the fuel pump and the carb itself. You can make a choice of that, but make sure you use a metal one, especially if you're near a hot area like an exhaust manifold. You don't want to be using a plastic one of these. You can just see the fire potential if you do, so make sure you use a metal canistered one if you go this route. Okay, back to this one here. You could actually just get, like I say, if you went with this fitting, you really don't have to. You can use the original line like I said, but I've got the option of using one of these, or I can screw in a piece of pipe with thread on it, one of these, and then I can put one of these nice large capacity filters here, especially on a high performance application, or say you're one of those people that kind of forgets and maybe, like I used to, never really thought about it too much. I've never had one of these larger ones plug up, but I have in the past have had one of these. I bought an old car, and wasn't, no maintenance had been done on it, and before I got around to it and was still learning about cars, one of these actually plugged up. It was on an old Ford car. So it sputtered, and I managed to get it into a place where they quickly checked it out and found out that's all it was, threw in a new part, and a few bucks later I was on my way again. So about filter changes, you should do them at a minimum every 6 months. Well, actually, you can get away with a year, I would say, but it'd be better to do it on a 6-month basis, especially if, well, I can explain another problem I had too. I'll finish up here first. Anyways, the idea of this thing, I really didn't like the way that they made this thing up. You start taking this off, you take the fuel line off an original Rochester carb, the way the fuel line goes. You pull this out. It's easy enough to get the filter out of there. Just got to make sure that the rubber gasket seal goes inside first, because they rely on this spring. This isn't the actual spring here. The one that they actually make at the factory is a tapered one, but I don't have one to show you, so I just use a spring that was adequate just for an explanation. So you put the filter in first, with the seal side in going first. You depend on this spring to push against that in order to make the seal inside so you don't get a leak. And then there's this famous little fiber washer. There's a little shoulder machined on the end of this fitting that goes into the front of the carburetor. And there's a little gasket that goes on there. This one is a red fiber type of material. Others I've seen are like a clear plastic, actually, where you really have to be careful. Like even if you make the modification, you still have to use that gasket to seal this filter housing. So my advice to you is to put a little bit of Vaseline or grease, maybe even better if you use a synthetic grease so it wouldn't react with the gasket depending on the material, but put a little bit of that on there first and then stick the gasket on there, because these are famous for jumping off and getting crunched up inside when you install them. Then you've got a leak for sure. You get a nice drip going down onto your intake manifold. So a little bit of grease or something there and stick that gasket seal on there. And this is going back in without any of the spring or the filter. So I was going to eliminate that to get a better flow rate. Basically, now that you've got that gasket stuck on there with the grease or what have you, let's crank that in there. Snug it up with the right size wrench. With mine I've got several possibilities like I was explaining, but if you go the regular route and you just want to increase capacity, you can just basically screw the fuel line back in there and then cut into the fuel line somewhere, probably just a little bit above the fuel pump actually, and install a much larger one. And there's extra insurance as well, so if you forgot to change your filter or you're not sticking to a maintenance schedule, you could probably get away with a few years with one that size. But as for that smaller one, you're just asking for it if you don't change it on a regular basis, at least every year. Like I say, 6 months is even better. So I just wanted to share with you that little modification I made in one of those days where I was having one of those scratch my head and go, how can I make this a little bit better? So there you have it, folks. That's what I have to say for today. So take care, have a nice day, and bye for now.